let's get through this.
Our world is built on an idea. It's an idea so powerful that we fight and die for it. We draw our maps around it. It shapes our politics and forms the basis of our very identity, who we think we are.
Lots of water.
It's an idea so pervasive that you've probably never even stopped to notice how weird it is. Because here's the thing, this idea is completely made up. And even though it might feel like it's been around forever, it's actually newer than you think.
Oh, I will. That's why I'm taking the weekend off, because it's going to be like 107 degrees. I'm going to sleep and, I don't know, probably go outside and go spend my time somewhere air-conditioned. That's the point, you know? I quickly, even, because, like, when it's 107 degrees during the day, even doing, like, a stream at night like I've been doing won't work, because it's still, like, 92 degrees at 2 o'clock in the morning. This was like this, earlier last week. You can do both of those things simply, Steve. I have it in the Discord. In fact, I have A, how to talk to these people, and B, I have self-defense tactics. I have a entire, like, set of videos on how to build a first aid kit for massive blood loss in case you go to a protest and someone gets shot. I talk about how to do both of these all the time. I practice both of these things all the time. You can do one and the other. Learn how to talk to people and also learn how to defend yourself. Learn how to use a weapon. If you can't get a gun, let's say you're a felon, then learn how to go take some martial arts classes. Go do boxing. Go hang out at a gym. And if you don't feel comfortable at a gym, then go and do some shit in the woods. Go do archery. Go learn how to fight with a sword. I have done both. Learning how to sword fight, by the way, is incredibly useful, even if you don't know how to fight. Learn CPR and first aid. That's, in fact, in the article that I have on how to do first aid for, let's say, a bullet wound in an emergency situation at a protest, so you can get someone to a hospital before they die. Learn how to protect yourself, learn how to protect your community, but also learn how to talk to your community and get them to learn how to do it as well. You need both. You can't have one without the other. I keep saying this all the time. We are too individualistic and not enough community focused. You need both. I'm anti-Trump, I'm anti-stupid, but the stupid people aren't stupid because they're born stupid. You can decultify somebody. It's not easy, but again, stop worrying about MAGA. There are tons of people who are not in the cult that you can convince. Go talk to people and find one that isn't a cultist and convince them. You're like this, like your entire aspect being there's nothing I can do other than like learn how to fight is stupid. It's not productive. It is anti-productive. It goes literally against the point of everything. There's no SRA in Arizona. That really sucks. Maybe we can contact SRA in other parts of the country and see if they can start a what would they be called? Not a club. There's a word for this. Start a branch or something. Not branch either. What's the word? It's gonna bother me now. You would say this to like motorcycle clubs, like a different, not a division either, but like, you know what I mean? Call other parts of the SRA and see if you can maybe convince them to help you start your own sector, not sector, come on, branches, thank you. See if you can open a branch in Arizona with the help of other branches. Maybe people in other branches know people in Arizona that could also, you know, come together and try and start one with you. Again, because the SRA is not just about, like, guns, or it's not even about socialism, it's not politics related, it's about learning how to use weapons, but it's also about community support and disaster support, outreach. These are the important parts. This is how you can get across to people, by helping them. And again, by the way, no one's coming to save you, and elections are kind of dead, but I still, for a little while at least, but I still advocate you try and join politics. Go run for your local council, go run for your state legislature, go run for your school board. You will still be able to have the power to make some changes. It might not be anywhere near enough, it might be marginal, but the more of us are in government, even on a local level, the less they can do. The DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, won 50 state legislature seats this election, more than any third party has done in decades. You can be that. Click, what do you mean click the Queen Matriarch? No, Schwarzberg, that's okay, I understand. Like, you're a mod, you got power. You didn't ban him for too long, right? Yeah, okay, yeah, like, that's fair. That's why you guys have the power, because I'm too nice, and then we get too distracted, and we get far off topic. You're good. And what's up, Tyler? Tyler is a troll, but he's also a very funny troll, and I'm a fan, so let him be for a little bit, if he's gonna troll. I do very much enjoy your comments on my videos. They're quite funny.
That idea is called the nation. It says that a country is more than just the land drawn into a set of borders. It's actually a giant community that is united by heritage and identity.
Yeah.
It says that the people, the land, the state, they're all one thing. That thing is called a nation. You're not just a person who happens to live in a place called America. You're American, or Brazilian, or Japanese, or Mexican, or Egyptian, Nigerian, Dutch, Micronesian. But let's stop a moment to learn the story of where this idea came from and how it took over everything.
I've talked about this before, by the way, in my belief that, like, not only just nationalism, but being proud of your country is something that I don't agree with, because pride should be reserved for something that you've accomplished. You can like your country, you can be, you know, an active participant. You like the people in your country. You can like your culture, which, by the way, like, trying to keep culture consistent is the death of culture. You need to, but you can advocate, you can spread the message of, you know, I like the people in my country, I like the messaging, I like my politics, I like, damn, I lost a follower. I think Simply Steve might have just unfollowed. Jesus. Well, that's pussy shit, whatever it is. Regardless of that, you have this idea of, you know, my country is my country and that I'm proud of it, but you were just born there by accident. You have done nothing to it. You can be proud of the things that your country does that you advocate for. You can be proud of the people in your country that you know, engage with. You can be proud of yourself. You can be proud of groups that you go out and protest with. But being proud of just the existence of your country is something that I disagree with. And I think that that is a proto-nationalism idea.
So much about our world suddenly makes sense. Okay, cool.
I don't know if it was him.
Sure?
So,
Great to see you.
Great to see you.
It feels wrong to call it made up, I know. Like, it sort of contradicts everything you've ever been told about the world.
That's Max Fisher, my old colleague, who taught me a lot about journalism. Max was a New York Times columnist, he wrote this book, and now he hosts a couple of podcasts. And he recently planted this idea in my mind of just how fake countries really are. So I wanted to bring him on to help me understand it and then explain it to you. It really does feel like countries are like natural, like they're a fundamental law of humans and human society.
Well,
just one.
Take France as an example. If I tell you France is made up, that feels wrong.
I mean, it does feel wrong because I look at a bunch of old maps.
This is a really good explanation of what I mean.
Way back in time.
Okay, good. Good. Then you're not a pussy. Based. I don't know who that was. They probably got mad at me saying that, like, you shouldn't be proud of your country.
There is a
people get mad at that shit
on the map called France or the Kingdom of France, whatever, and it's changed, but like France was there for a really long time.
But okay, think about it.
Oh, a click. That's what you meant, Queen Matriarch. Thank you. I was so confused. There's a delay on YouTube because I forgot to set the settings to low latency.
Is that true? France, like most countries, is built around a story. And that story says that there's always been a French people who share a culture, an ethnicity, and an eternal connection to the land. The borders and the government might have changed over the years, but this land has always been some version of France. Wrong. It's not true.
Okay, but show me why not.
Okay, we think that borders like France's formed because they contained people with the same ethnicity who spoke the same language, right? But when you overlay a map of the actual genetic makeup in Europe, it looks like this.
There is quite a large mix. Like, for example, I haven't done a 23andMe, but I've seen my parents'. And, I mean, I'm Turkish, so pretty close to Europe. And all the fuck over the place, down to Africa, all the way to Asia, like Mongolia. You don't have this one ethnicity. Your nationality isn't real. It is a social construct, and it's okay to like it. There's nothing wrong with that. But to be proud of your country is something very different than to be proud of the people in your country, the things that you do, the things that you work for, the things that you advocate for. Pride should be reserved for something you accomplish, not for something that happens by accident.
Now look at France, and you'll see that any given part of the country has closer genetic links with foreigners across the border than they do with their own countrymen.
Yeah, but like,
one more time?
You talk to Europeans...
Sorry, I missed that.
The border than they do with any given part of the country has closer genetic links with foreigners across the border than they do with their own countrymen.
Yeah, but like, you talk to Europeans who see their country as like the home of their unique ethnic group. And I think there's even studies on this that show that like Germany is for Germans and Italy is for Italians. Like these borders were drawn around groups of people because...
Sounds like something, you know, you hear from AFD, Germany is for Germans. That kind of idea is proto-nationalism. Now, of course, the AFD is fully nationalism, but, you know, they're Nazis. It's the literal Nazi party. But we have this in America, too. We are proud of America. Okay, but what about America are you proud of that you had any involvement in? What are you proud of about your country? And why are you proud of it if you've not been involved with it at all? Let's say I can say that I like the New Deal. I like FDR's policies. Can't say that I'm proud of America for the New Deal because I had no part in it.
Because of their common ethnicity.
So people from certain areas might share certain traits, like red hair, for example, but look at a map that shows the distribution of red hair, and you see stuff like this never lines up with national borders.
Okay, so countries aren't correlated with ethnicity, but what about like language?
So today, sure, people within these borders predominantly speak one language, but this only happened really, really recently. Here's a map of languages in France as of the early 1800s.
That's a lot. That's not even, you know, that's just a couple hundred years ago, which in the grand scheme of time of human history is nothing. It's nothing. This is the era of like when Marx was alive.
Only the people in this
We are a part of history right now, but history is like we've always been. History doesn't exist. We are in the present. We look back at history, but it's not real. It's past. We are in the, like, time isn't linear. Time is a concept that, like, we've created. History exists because it happened, but you are creating the future right now. You're writing history this moment. I'm writing history this moment. Each of us are. History is also something that we look back on with a biased view. History is written by the victors. We've all heard that before. We don't know everything about history. History is an idea that we've made up in our minds. You know, like, not right now, but, you know, eventually, maybe, yes, you might be a historic figure. Depends on how relevant you are to the discourse 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 100 years from now.
Area spoke something close to modern-day French. Most people in France spoke something else and had for hundreds of years.
Wow, that's surprising to me, that there were a bunch of different languages within today's France. So people living in this land were culturally and genetically fractured. That's what these maps show. And they spoke a bunch of different languages.
There's like literally no way for us to know at this point. There's no records of Stoner. What if the Mongols were actually the good guys? I suppose I should actually read the question now. We have no idea. Now, some of the things they did were probably bad. Some of the things they did were probably good, just like any other culture, any other country, any other empire. Of course, some of the things they did were very bad, like Genghis Khan did a lot of bad shit. I'm sure they did a lot of good shit too. Again, like I'm part Mongol going back, like in my parents' like ethnic tree. There's some of that. I'm part like what is it, Sudanese even. It doesn't matter. Your ethnicity is made up. It is about the actions that you take now that matter. History is written by the victors, as you have said, as we have all said. It doesn't matter in a way that affects you now because you don't know for a fact what happened at any point in time. You know what you know. You know the things that you have learned. You might know some of history, obviously, like we all know some history here. I like to talk about history often. I believe in historic materialism, and we talk about that, but the history that we know is not the full picture. And so basing our reality off of these preconceived notions of what we consider historically accurate is not an accurate way to continue on forward. Like, you can have that in your mind. You can have that as a base construct of what you build your ideology on, but you do not have to refer back to it. It doesn't matter after a point. Once you build the foundations, then history is irrelevant. You are now creating history. We could call them mostly peaceful just in case. Like, I wouldn't even know. I haven't studied them too much because, I mean, maybe that's my Western chauvinism. Maybe I need to learn more about the East. Maddie Holmes, also the past genetic components of past cultures is not going to match current ones at all. Yeah, absolutely. Not even a little bit. So nationalism is genuinely stupid. It is a refusal for progress, which is literally just the death of society. Every single person that argues my culture is under attack and I want to save it is arguing for the death of their culture. Because that's not how the world works. Cultures need to grow and change to continue on, to be adapting new things that come in, to be adapted into new cultures. You change, you come go. Look at these, all of these different languages that were spoken in France just 300 years ago. Are all of these cultures dead? Of course not. They're not dead. They're all just part of France now. But they all still keep their own cultural aspects. If you go to where Breton is over here, and if you go to where Lyoness is here, they will still have much of their traditions, but they also have new ones because they've grown. They've adapted. Any culture that says they are under attack is killing their culture, I'm confused, I think. No, what I mean, when you see right-wingers talking about how people are let's take Germany. Yes, yes, now you get it. Like, Germany is for Germans. These Syrians are coming in and they're changing Germany. Well, that's not a bad thing. You're adapting and you're taking parts of a new culture and adding them to your culture and improving. For example, there's a lot of Turkish people that live in Germany, and now Germans eat a lot more Turkish food. That's culture that they've adapted and have now is become part of theirs. They like it. It's a good thing. It's growth. A lack of growth is the death of society. Well, what about African countries and such? Obviously, that's an exception. No, not necessarily. Like, they are also growing in culture. Like, this applies everywhere. There is no such thing as a country. It's all made up. And like, yes, we know what the Germans did historically, and yes, we know about the AfD. That doesn't mean, you know, all Germans are bad. It doesn't mean Germany's real. Simply Steve, I'm gonna leave with this. Have fun with your nicey nice approach. You're still not even listening to me, mate, because I said do both. Just show them you're weak. And again, me talking about how you should build self-defense mechanisms, how you should learn how to buy a gun, learn how to use a gun, go and learn, like, martial arts, learn first aid, prepare for them to attack you, but then also try, you think that like that's being weak and play nice? You're just dooming, man. You've already lost. If you're not gonna try and you just want to fight until the death, what are you, like a 17-year-old who wants to die in glory in battle and go to Valhalla? Shut the fuck up. You're not helping here. You're a moron. You need to go out and actually give a shit. Try and convince people. No one's saying you shouldn't learn how to protect yourself. No one's saying that you shouldn't learn how to engage with people in a way that, like, encourages them to protect themselves. No one's saying you shouldn't learn how to fight, that you shouldn't expect violence. You're just the one saying that there's no hope for anybody else and that we should all just give up on the world and prepare to fight everybody. Shut the fuck up, go touch some grass.
Languages, but they still belonged to one big political entity. Like, there was a France here. Again, I've got this tool and I like scroll all the way back to like the 1200s and I see a thing called the Kingdom of France, ruled by a king.
Sorry, like that really makes me mad when people like argue with a shadow version of me in their head that says things that I'm not actually saying. That shit really makes me mad. The idea of you can't do both, like, isn't even, you're not even engaging with it. You're just imagining that I'm saying, no, you can't do that. You shouldn't learn how to fight. You should learn just how to talk to people. Learn how to protect yourself and try and get other people on board on your side. There's plenty of Americans you can convince. You don't have to go after MAGA.
Who was apparently ruling people who lived on all of this land. So wouldn't these people be considered French? Like, isn't this proof that countries have existed for hundreds, if not thousands of years?
Actually, no, not in the way that we mean countries today. For someone living down here, hundreds of kilometers from the King's Palace in Paris, there was no concept of being French. They'd probably identify with the people in their village or their town, but that is about it. I'm like, what do you care if another town hundreds of miles away happens to be ruled by the same king, who, by the way, is just some guy who levies taxes on you occasionally?
Okay, so...
By the way, this is still true. Because again, if you live in Louisiana, you have your own culture. You have systems that come from other cultures that have been integrated, which are different from someone in, let's say, Wisconsin. But they still are part of the same country. Believing that everything is the same, whether you're in Wisconsin or whether you're in, I don't know, Shreveport, Louisiana, or like that's a stupid concept to think that everything that you believe is the same, that your culture is the same. You don't have that sameness. There is no consistent culture like that. There is no one place on earth where everything is that culture and has no influence of others. There is no one place on earth that is just one ethnic group. None of this shit exists. It's all made up. The French king pushed hard to homogenize France to a huge extent. I get that, but like, we're also doing this now. France was culturally and linguistically diverse for the longest time. As we saw, you know, there was hundreds of languages spoken in France just in like the early 1800s. None of the ideas of nationalism are real. They're all made up.
French people at this time were more like subjects who happened to be ruled by the same person living in a faraway capital, as opposed to today where countries are more like one giant club.
Sorry if I come off a little like snappy. I'm just a little mad now. Take food and buying stuff out of the equation. There's no difference between people. It's not true. Beliefs are entirely different. Cultures are entirely different. Religion is entirely different. Like, everything is so different. It's not food. It's not buying stuff. That's just the consumerist stuff. No, I know. I got snappy at the comment that I made. Sorry, Maddie Holmes. Didn't mean to snap at you. But no, it's not the same. Even, like, take consumerism out of the picture. What is the similarities that are homogenized between a guy in Louisiana and a guy in Montana? They have entirely different dialects. They have different beliefs. They have different people around them. There's different cultures that they engage with consistently. Let's say Louisiana has go to New Orleans. They believe in witchcraft over there. It's like a tourist thing. Obviously, it comes from a consumerized, like capitalistized version of beliefs of Haitian groups and of like Dominican groups and of like South American, Caribbean cultures that have been integrated into not only the architecture, not only the language, not only the naming of the places, but of the way that people interact with each other, the things that people believe in these areas. I'm not talking about food and buying shit, although that does also add into it, but no one is the same. No, like I'm from New York and I lived in I grew up in New Jersey. I've lived in New York, I've lived in North Carolina, I've lived in Colorado, I've lived in Turkey, I've lived in Montenegro, I've lived in Australia. There is significant difference between just like I've also lived in 3 different cities in Turkey, Istanbul, Izmir, I've lived in Ankara. There are differences even within a country based on the region of dialect, beliefs, religious beliefs, cultural traditions, ways of interacting with people. All of these change. Expectations and social norms, all of these change very dramatically just based on where you are. I saw this video. The person is this person's based in Red Pill. What's the channel again? Johnny Harris. Johnny Harris is good. He actually is based in Red Pill, but he often does leave out some information. But at the same time, he wants to appeal to a broader audience, which is like people on the left get really mad at Johnny Harris because he doesn't say the stuff that makes you sound like a conspiracy theorist. So, which is why I'm here. We can watch him and I can say the stuff that makes me sound like a conspiracy theorist. I'll take the L.
All feel unified.
I'll send you the link.
Willing to die for a national story.
Right, and borders used to fluctuate all the time. If you lived up here and your town switched from the French king to the English king, did your identity suddenly flip from French to English too? No, you're still just a farmer from a village trying to scrape by.
Okay, so that's France. There was divided languages and ethnicities, arbitrary borders, and not really a sense of like unified France.
He's rumored to be a Fed. I was being called CIA earlier. And Shards Park, one thing I just want to add to what you said, because you're exactly correct. But if you want a revolution, I've talked about this before. The only successful revolution we can possibly have is a collective liberation, a cultural revolution, not in the Maoist way, a collective liberation of the working class from the bottom up, including women, children, religious groups, ethnic groups, everybody. It has to be the bourgeoisie is the only people that are not included. Everyone in the proletariat, everyone is my brother and sister in arms. Every child, every man, woman, every religion, every non-binary, every culture, it doesn't matter. It's just it's the rich and that's it. It's all of us versus like 3,000 billionaires. Also, your lag isn't as bad as you think. I'm being naughty, stealing company time. It's difficult to find a spot to do the thing. Gotta be discreet when you're on the phone. Ooh, watching me at work. Naughty, naughty. Although, thank you. America's too big for a violent revolution to work unless it's literally everywhere at the same time. We're too diffuse. Exactly. And this is what I mean. Because I fully believe that the right wing will start a violent revolution in this country in our lifetime. But the point isn't to fight against them. The point is to have convinced enough of America that at least to listen to our rhetoric enough that it's sitting in the back of their head. So then when shit starts to hit the fan and they start to get scared, we seem like the reasonable people. And also, at the same time, buy guns, learn how to use them. The right wing has all of the guns. Learn how to protect yourself. And when the time comes that we have to defend ourselves, we are the rational ones. We have the support of the broader public, and we can also defend our communities. Then we win. That's the thing. That's the game. They're going to start it. We're going to win if we can manage to do this. You have to get people to care. You have to get people to listen. And yes, you have to learn how to defend yourself. You both. Not one or the other.
But what about elsewhere? Is this happening everywhere?
That's everywhere.
Okay, but what about like China? China was a place where you had...
The game is rigged. So play as if you're playing a rigged game. I said this as a joke yesterday, but We're playing a rigged game, and I'm the type of person who likes hacked Pokemon ROMs that are made to be frustratingly hard. So, like, I feel like I might be the right person here to understand how to play the long game and beat the rigged game. At least one of them. I'm the perfect kind of autist to do the strategy, all right?
A powerful imperial government. They were proud of their identity. They saw themselves as the world's central civilization. Like when I look at Chinese history, there seems to be this cultural identity that lasted and still seems to last into today.
So that version of ancient Chinese identity that you're referring to, that was felt strongly among the political elite in the capital, but basically nowhere else. Most people under their rule did not speak Chinese and did not think of themselves as Chinese. The borders were always shifting and even sometimes—
Game Shark, you think I cheat? Hell nah.
Split between rival empires, which meant there was no fixed sense of what constituted the Chinese people or Chinese land.
So actually very similar to the French story. So let's get back to that. If I look at my little time lapse of maps, eventually the shape of France does turn into France, the France that we know today. How does
I will have dual citizenship. I have to renounce my Turkish citizenship because America only lets you have 2. Australia doesn't care how many that you have. But Turkey is actually pretty based with that, because if you renounce your Turkish citizenship, you still get to keep all of your benefits. Like renouncing your Turkish citizenship is just like a paper thing. Like, it doesn't matter, because there's a lot of Turkish people that live in Germany, and Germany doesn't let you have dual citizenship. So Turkey has laws that you can renounce your citizenship, but still continue to have every benefit of being a Turkish citizen anyway.
How does that happen?
A big step in that direction, and this applies for China too, is by becoming an empire.
Ah, okay. Empires, yes. I know empires.
Empires.
That's something that I've actually looked quite a bit into, and I want to kind of approach the imperial history of France and Europe and the world, but through this lens of it was very fractured, and sort of see where it goes from there.
Again, this idea of empires comes from the ideas of nationalism, of the nation, of pride in your nation. This is where it leads.
Wait, before we go on, I'm flying to Saudi Arabia tonight, literally in a few hours. And one of the big issues that I face when I travel is
we're gonna watch his
staying
ad.
connected on my phone. It's pretty expensive to just let my phone connect to the local network, and my carrier back here in the United States charges me a ton of money every day. So I've started using eSIMs, which is, the reason I'm telling you about this is because it's the sponsor of today's video, Airalo.
I
just,
figured that,
a moment
Johnny.
ago, right before filming this, went on to Airalo and found Saudi Arabia and went through a literal 90-second sign up and checkout process where I was able to purchase a large data pack and get this QR code. At the moment I land in Saudi Arabia, I scan this and set it up on my phone, and boom, I will have access to high-speed data, a lot of it. And I got it for a really affordable price. If you travel, you should definitely download this app to be ready next time you land in a new place. Having high-speed internet on your phone is so important when you're traveling, at least for me. And Airalo is making it so easy to get really good, affordable, high-speed data packs. There's no SIM cards that you're installing, nothing physical.
Empire
it's
is
all
a
digital
technical
and
term,
all very
Tyler?
smooth
I mean,
and
it's
easy. And there
kind
are
of
over 200 countries and regions
pretty,
represented where you can get an eSIM.
common, isn't it?
So next time you're going on the road, check this out. I did this on my computer, but I'm currently downloading the app. Okay, I've got the app, I've signed up. No matter where I am in the world, I will easily be able to jump in and sign up for an eSIM. When you buy your first eSIM, you use the code Johnny3.
Law doesn't
and
even
you will
really
get
matter anymore,
$3 off your
guys.
first eSIM purchase. This is a cool product and I'm very excited about it. If it's interesting to you, you can do 2 things. Go to try.airalo.com/JohnnyHarris and sign up, and download the app. This will allow you to quickly buy an eSIM next time you land in some other country or before you go. eSIMs are game changers when you're traveling. I'm very happy Airalo exists, and I'm very grateful that they sponsored today's video. With that, let's dive back into this history. Okay, so Max has sufficiently convinced me that countries aren't real, that they're made up in our minds, and that France was not a real country until recently. So I've been looking into what happens next, trying to answer this question of when does France start to look like the France of today? The first thing I thought of here was the French Revolution, the late 1700s. What looks more like national spirit than a bunch of people rising up together to overthrow their king?
let them eat cake.
But it turns out that
You know, she never said that, right? Like, Marie Antoinette was not like the villain that we painted her as. She never said let them eat cake. She was actually in favor of giving more to the citizens of France. We just kind of blame her for, I mean, I was going to say for no reason, but because of misogyny. Oh, by the way, going back to the point of being able to protect yourself, here's a gender diverse person who is learning how to protect themselves. See, you can do both. Build community and learn to protect yourself.
Not even close. People at this time still basically didn't speak French. They didn't share some French identity. In fact, the French Revolution can kind of be seen as the start of the long road of building a French identity. The process of a bunch of fractured communities unifying under one story. This revolution embodied a fairly new idea, that the government actually derives its legitimacy not from God or some other natural right, but from the people themselves.
I still don't understand why you don't think you can do both. Like, it seems stubborn and it seems reactionary. You sound reactionary. You sound like MAGA does. Why don't you do both? Why don't you even try to do both? Like, you can try and fail. There's nothing wrong with that. And you can still continue to have your beliefs. You don't have to change anything. All you have to do is talk to human fucking beings. This antisocial behavior is how we got here in the first place. This refusal to talk to other people is how we got here in the first place. This individual, I'll become a martyr and everyone else is dumber than me and I am smarter than everyone else and I'm done talking to it. Time for action. That's how we fucking got here.
That all of these people were not royal subjects, but rather citizens. That this country was theirs, which turned all of this land, at least in their minds, into a new kind of thing. The soil that they came from and owned together. But listen, this is all still really abstract in people's minds. It's like a very new idea, and it would remain so until this guy came around. Napoleon Bonaparte advanced the process of turning France into France, perhaps more than any other
French. Convincing the French that they had one national identity, they should be proud of it, and that they deserve more. It's the same concept.
Person. Remember how France looked like this? Well, Napoleon started to make it look a lot more like this. He rallied the people around this new idea of patriotism, complete with symbols and songs and art that emphasized French greatness. The idea—
Again, indoctrination, this is the same concept of what we're facing right now. It's just a proto-version. The convincing of all of these different groups that they are one France is the same thing that we're getting in America of all of the media based on patriotism, America first. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, they're lying. And obviously, like, Napoleon was also pulling shit behind the scenes. But it is all based on words, not reality. Do you know how many different ethnicities we have in America? Do you want to look at a map of ethnicity across America? Quality image. We are a diverse mix of peoples. Most people live on the coasts, and there are mixes. There are lots of different people everywhere. There is no one America. We are a country of immigrants. All of us are, unless you're Native American. And so, again, the idea of patriotism for America comes from a pride in American values, the American dream. But you're not living that dream and you're not engaging with those values. So you don't deserve the pride. Pride should be reserved for something you do.
Idea that we all belong to one giant tribe. This idea was further cemented when Napoleon recruited men from all around this country to come join his army.
It changes over time,
fight
Tyler.
For France.
Look at it 30 years
ago. Giving them the sense that they were all joined in a glorious national fight. and in the process, spreading that nationalistic idea all throughout Europe. Napoleon did something else that was very important, and you can see it in this painting. Instead of pledging loyalty to the Pope, as European kings had always done, here he is crowning himself. The Catholic Church at this time had been declining in power, and Napoleon was sidelining it in favor of himself, his imperial cult of personality. This was a pretty smooth power play, but it also helped shift people's sense of loyalty away from religion and towards their nation. By the end of his reign, Napoleon's France was pretty unrecognizable from those scattered, loosely connected kingdoms that had dominated.
Here's 2010. Red is Germans. And Mexicans is salmon colored. The map changes over time because there's no such thing as one consistent ethnic cultural country. All of this shit's made up.
This land for many, many years. It was looking a lot more like one thing, like a country. Okay, but there was still a lot more to do before France became as unified as we think of it today. Their revolution eventually faltered, these Napoleonic wars didn't really work out, but then something bigger happened. Industrialization. What Napoleon and others previously had done had helped unify France kind of mentally, psychologically. But what industrialization does is it unites it physically with iron and concrete. Here come all these.
At this point during industrialization is when you start to have this idea of individualism over community become more and more and more prominent, because community does not fit with the idea of an industrial workforce. The separate individual needs to focus on their productivity, their efficiency. And I mean, this is right around like the time where Marx would have been alive, writing Capital. We can see that in his writing. I should really do another Marx stream. I haven't read Capital in a little bit for you guys, but this is the point in time where we stop, where we move away from community, where we become a less, like, a culture that is less focused on each other and more focused on ourselves. We don't want to grow anymore. We want to stay the same, and we as ourselves want to rise up in the class rankings. We want to rank up to the upper class, which does not work. That doesn't happen. Very rarely can someone go from the lower classes to the upper class, because classism is built to not have that be easy. It's built to prevent that from happening. And then we use these systems to separate people, and we continued on from here. Everything from this point onward was a decline in community. Now, you don't need to remove any of the other aspects of this. Arguably, some should be. But if you reintegrate community into the system, make it a cooperative, your incentive is to cooperate with yourself, with your neighbors, to improve not only your life, but the life of the people around you, because there is no difference, there is no culture, there is no nationality. Culture, sure, you know what, fine, there is culture, but culture changes. There's no consistent culture. There's no nationality. You don't need pride in your nation. You need pride in your community. The people around you that work with you to both better your life and theirs. Liberation of the individual through liberation of the community. Leftist Leo, don't stop talking. That's one thing you shouldn't do. Just because people are getting cross with you, that doesn't mean that they're just frustrated with the doom pill stuff. There's still hope. I'm not going to say anything else, but I just wanted you to say there is community out there for everyone. And yes, it's good to fight back against real threats, but it's also good to be able to have diplomacy with people who think that they are right-wing because of populist rhetoric. Perfectly said, Leftist Leo.
Factories, and factories need trains to bring in raw materials and to send out finished products. So you see all these new train networks that put France's towns within just a few hours of each other, interlinking communities that had always been separated by distance. In turn, this brought more people into the cities, melting pots of people from all over the country now swirling around together. All of their little regional identities were mixing into a new French identity.
Shut up, Tyler.
Something they all shared. Factory work more and more required people to read, so the government built a national school system. They taught the French language, along with French national pride and values. Soon, all the Bretons and the Occitans,
as George Carlin would call them, indoctrination centers. Now, obviously, there's some things that you learn in school that are useful, but they also teach you how to live in a class structure. Again, you go to school, all of you have been to high school, I assume, middle school, elementary school. Why is it built to function like a workday? I wonder. Why are you separated into groups? Why are you incentivized to form cliques inside of these groups? Why are some kids, specifically generally the rich and attractive kids, the popular kids, and they get a higher degree of respect and social allowance in what they're allowed to do and how they're allowed to behave, versus kids that are outside of those groups, because it teaches you class structure. Now, again, not saying that education's bad. In fact, a lot of, Marx himself specifically did not like the idea of schools, of education, in the manner that they were built at the time. And I can understand that, but I don't think giving up on education is a good idea either. I think we need to reform education from the bottom up to teach people not how to live in class structure, not how to live in a society where they go to work every day, but to communicate and be cooperative with each other, to work together, to care about their fellow student. Now, of course, we have no ability to do this right now. We don't have this power, but this is the correct pathway. It's about all of the systems that currently exist are not innately negative. Well, some of them are actually, but most of them are not. But all of them can be reformed to be useful in a way that is designed to create a society of cooperation, of good faith, of improving each other's lives and improving your own. We had multiple politician kids at my school, and the majority were insufferable. Yeah. The mayor's kid in my high school bought a BMW before he had his permit, and then crashed it before he even had his driver's license.
Tens would become
got a new one
French.
after too.
The school teachers were kind of like heroes. They were nicknamed the foot soldiers on the front lines of this effort to indoctrinate the next generation in this new national identity. Rising literacy meant mass media, newspapers. Now people could read about the events of the day, making them feel a part of a community. They could keep up to date on the nation's politics, making the capital feel within reach to everyone. Now, remember how Napoleon had built all of those outposts throughout the country? Well, now
before we move on, I just want to show this part of the thing again. Hold on, where is it? Where's the list? Give me the list, motherfucker. Here we go. Imagine a system built on all of these exact systems, minus the conscription, minus change the national symbols to community-centric symbols. Everyone gets citizenship. We can remove step one. We are all part of the same. We are all human. I'm proudly a globalist. I don't give a shit about your country. I think we should all be one people. I just think it should be a direct democracy and built not on the profit incentive, not on capital, not on a means of production that is owned by a few, not on material conditions in which we have to live in that are difficult, that are struggle-based, that are honestly immoral and unethical to put people through. Imagine this system with everyone has citizenship, community-centric symbols, no conscription, a decline of the church, railways, cool, cities, cool, schools that exist to teach you to be cooperative, to teach you to have empathy, to teach you critical thinking, as well as history, math, English, or whatever language you speak. You still can have all of those systems, and a mass media built on something like what I do, this type of media. I feel like maybe a society that is built on those ideals, which are very, very, very slightly different than what we have here. Not a massive difference. Not even a noticeable difference for the vast majority of the citizens. Not until, you know, they start getting paid more. The idea of mass media here is key because we use mass media currently to indoctrinate. But indoctrination, again, propaganda and indoctrination are not good or bad words. They are neutral words that have meanings. But you can indoctrinate somebody into critical thinking. For example, I do this. I indoctrinate you into not believing anything anyone says, to think about it. Not even me. Don't believe me. Sit there, think about what I said, and if you have a disagreement, air it. If you find something that disagrees with it, analyze what I said versus that, and decide on your own. Maybe go talk to your neighbors, talk about it with your community, have a discussion, and figure out what is correct this way. Because I'll tell you a little secret. Right and wrong are based on what is best for you and the community. That's it. That's it. That's what right and wrong is what makes life better for the most amount of people, or even just better in general. It doesn't have to be for everybody, because something could be right and be only good for you, but it could be right and good for everybody. When something is wrong, is it when it's negative for you, the community, both or separately. It doesn't matter. Anybody else. If it's bad, then it's bad for various different reasons. Wrong is wrong because of how the consequences come out afterward, how the outcomes are. You need to be able to analyze these things. Don't believe you, that would mean that I'm supposed to believe everyone. Wait, but no, exactly. You don't believe anybody. You believe yourself, and you take in information from whatever source, ideally multiple. Take information. There's a reason we watch Fox News every now and again on this channel, because I like to know what the right wing is thinking. I like to have that information, as well as the information that I get from my left-wing sources, so that I can analyze them and see what I think, my personal view of what is the correct answer, what is real. We decide our reality ourselves, but when we talk to others, like I do with you, our reality is decided by a collective. When I say something, someone earlier said something that someone corrected me on, and I changed. I said, I'm sorry, right, I'm wrong. There we go. That's different. Suddenly, the entire belief that I had on that one thing shifted slightly. Why? Because of the community interaction. Because somebody else had a point that they had pointed out that I had missed. But I should believe them because you told me not to. No, you should believe them because you feel that it's right, and that, you have to decide this for yourself as well as with others. You believe something if it makes sense to you, but then you go and share it with others and see what they think. And if they think it makes sense to them, then it makes sense, and you hold on to that. And if someone challenges that belief, then you analyze that belief with their challenge, you take that into account, and if it is enough of a challenge, like if the challenge is correct, then you either add it to your belief or you change your belief accordingly. You need to use critical thinking all the time. Every moment of every day, you should be using some amount of critical thinking. Good day, mate. Good morning, Cheeseburger Merv. Good to see you. It's been a hot minute. These midnight streams are not great for my Aussie viewers. But do you understand what I mean of deciding what to believe is a community effort? And the right gets this, because that's how they've indoctrinated their people, is they have this community that continues to reinforce these beliefs. However, I want to build a community that is built on challenging beliefs to find the right answer through answering every challenge. Every single challenge will allow you to A, grow your knowledge base, B, either change your ideals or change someone else's based on who's incorrect, and C, interact with new ideas that interact with existing beliefs that you have from a non-biased perspective.
Newspapers. Now people could read about the events of the day, making them feel a part of a community. They could keep up to date on the nation's politics, making the capital feel within reach to everyone. Now remember how Napoleon had built all of those outposts throughout the country? Well now, thanks to all of these advances in travel and communication, the central government could actually rule over these places, over every corner of the country, through a uniform, universal government system rather than through local lords and magistrates. And, like in the schools, they mandated that all of this was done in the French language and conveying the French national story, pride in the nation. So yeah, when Max says that the nation is a new thing, he's really right. It wasn't until like 1870 or 1880 that you start to see a modern French identity that kind of looks like the one we know today. And some historians...
This is what I mean. Like, this is a new idea. This isn't something that's so ingrained in human society that we can't change it.
The guy who wrote this book argued that it didn't really fully happen until the 1910s, like 100 years ago. Some beautiful maps in this book, by the way.
I love a good map.
Countries are a new thing, but here's the deal. Our leaders don't want us to know that. In France, the ruling elite at the time didn't want to admit that France was kind of a new thing. That would sound way too weak and delicate. So they kind of constructed a national mythology that implied that France has kind of been around forever.
Oh look, sounds kind of familiar.
They wanted people to believe that the idea
sounds kind of like Manifest Destiny to me.
France was...
Yeah, you're telling me, Cheeseburger Merv, I have no air conditioning until Wednesday.
Eternal. It was fixed. And therefore, so were these borders, this shape. That was a much more compelling story that created a sense of loyalty and patriotism among the French people. And it totally worked. This idea spread not just in France, but throughout this whole continent.
In Italy, it began when an ambitious rabble-rouser set his followers marching on Rome.
And eventually, our entire world would be built off of this idea.
This was happening all over Europe.
So France's nation building really seems like it was top-down. Was it like that everywhere?
It's a lot of both top-down and bottom-up. So Napoleon had spread these ideas.
I have several fans. I have a lot of fans, but the fans don't really do much when it's that hot. Again, I'm going to be going out and going and spending time in other air-conditioned places. I'll still have the fans on and like cold water for Frank and all of that. I'm actually taking Frank with me.
As he'd conquered across Europe. And as that way of thinking sunk in...
I don't have a car, I drive a moped, so I can't do that either.
Had spread these ideas as he'd conquered across Europe. And as that way of thinking sunk in, more and more people wanted a nation. People all over Europe staged this wave of revolutions that mostly failed, but got people animated to fight for what they saw as unrealized national homelands. And
I do have friends, though, so that's helpful.
Some fought wars of independence or unification that did eventually create nations.
Okay, like Italy eventually did that, right? It was super fractured, seemingly, and then it all comes together.
Yes, though even when Italy finally unified in 1861...
Wait, 1861? That's so recent.
Oh, it gets even wilder. Only 2.5% of people in the new Italy even spoke Italian, and almost none of them even thought of themselves as Italian. One of the unification leaders has this famous quote that I love. He said, "We have made Italy, and now we have to make Italians."
Wow, so how do you do that? How do you make Italians?
It was mostly the same as in France. Schools, national administration, industrialization, and a lot of national myth-making.
So
you can take Turkey as an example, too. The Ottoman Empire fell, and Ataturk, the guy who founded Turkey based off of some of the beliefs of the Ottomans, but the language is built on some Ottoman, some Armenian, some Latin. Like, you don't have any one culture that is a dominant culture that supersedes everything else. No matter where you are in the world, you are not any one culture. You are not a real, like, countries don't exist, no matter where you are. And this idea will keep coming up over and over and over again. And we need to understand this to understand nationalism. You need to explain this to somebody for them to understand that patriotism is like, it's a myth. You're fighting for a myth. And, oh, Cheeseburger Merv, you'll be happy to know that more people think I'm CIA now.
what I saw was that France doesn't finish that process until like 100 years ago, like 1910. Was it the same for Italy?
Italy started even later, and it was not as industrialized as France had been, so it went much slower. Even by 1950, only 20% spoke Italian.
1950.
And
this is
people
after
mostly
World War
identified
II.
with their regional language or with their city, and not with Italy. That only really changed with the first national TV channels in the 1960s. There was even this famous TV show, It's Never Too Late, that taught people Italian.
Non è mai troppo tardi.
Non è mai troppo tardi.
All of which is to say that this process of internal nation building, of becoming a country, can take like a century, and it's all really recent.
What's crazy about this is once you start to really get your head around the national myth, you kind of see it everywhere. And you start to see how much it has influenced our modern history, identities that have led to war and conflict all over the world. So let's go back to Europe really quick and look at a few more, like Germany. Germany unified in like the 1860s and 70s. Its process was a lot like Italy's. And it actually inspired other countries to rise up with this ethnic nationalism all across Europe, carving old empires into new countries. Serbia.
If the nation is a myth, is that IRS guy that keeps coming after me a figment of my imagination? No. See, the law is a threat that the ruling, like the majority ruling group of any given area makes on its citizens. So, like, the government is not a nationality. The government is it's almost just a corporation, just a different kind of one. And it is a group of people with power enough to threaten you to follow its laws. Every law is a threat. Every government uses violence as a threat to continue to stay in power, to continue to control you. And that's the point here. You know, like, nationalism is built on the need to control, is built on a myth that gets people not only agreeing with each other that they have this right to control, and not they as the people, but I mean the people above them, the nation's leaders are the ones that get control, because the nation's citizens were convinced that we are all one nation, and these are the people that are leading us to glory. That myth perpetuates into the population so that when they make their threat of violence, because again, if you don't pay the IRS, what happens? They arrest you. You go to jail. That's violence. That's the threat of violence against you that is perpetuated by the public's belief in the myth of the nation.
Romania, Norway, Bulgaria, Albania, a lot of them followed a similar template. But the invention of all of these new countries was kind of like a powder keg that eventually exploded into the First World War. The winners got together and redrew the entire map around the national idea. One nation for one people. The idea is that this would kind of create peace, because if one people were just in these boundaries, then there'd be no need to fight wars, right? Wrong. Because borders were never going to be perfectly drawn around a people. Like, this is Germany's border, but this is where all the German speakers are. You can see they don't line up. So instead, all of this redrawing of borders led to ultra-nationalists rising up across Europe on promises to conquer the land that they considered rightfully theirs, which led...
This is the outcome all the way. Like, every time, this is the point of nationalism. This is where it leads to. Now, I think you can be like, I love the geographic features of Australia rather than the cultural identity. Sure, I also do think it's one of the dopest sanctuaries on earth, but patriotic is a term that I don't like to use here. You missed the bit where I said pride should be reserved for something that you have accomplished. You shouldn't be proud of your country, but you can like your country. You can advocate that it's great. You can, it's just the patriotism is part of that national myth. You didn't make Australia, but it is a dope sanctuary. You can enjoy Australia. You could love Australia. You could love the people of Australia. You can be proud of you and your people and the things that you accomplish. You can be proud of the history of the groups that you are within, the forces that you are working with to create the change, where you're going on that road and where you came from, because you are a part of it. But if you are not actively a participant in something, then pride and patriotism, I feel, don't make sense here. Proud of Pine Gap, I mean, no comment, Zach.
To yet another world war. And this gets to the dark side of the idea of a nation. It very naturally breeds the persecution of minorities. Because if a nation is supposedly defined by its shared ethnic identity, then anyone who is not in that majority identity is an outsider. They're a threat to the character of the nation. Now, of course, the national identity, the national character, the ethnic identity, all of this was made up. But boy, did people start to believe that it was real. Fascists would go on to murder millions in the name of nationalism.
Because it feels good. Because it feels like a community. This is how they do this. They take away your community, and then they build a mythological one that is significantly larger but excludes most of that community. There is now a class structure in this community where the dominant group gets to oppress every other group. But none of this is real. None of this existed. It was already communities that existed all over. Every part, like we looked at that map of France from the early 1800s. Those were all different ethnicities that had various different communities in them. The homogenization of this led specifically to one group being in charge of the rest of those groups. And that group in charge, again, the dominant majority power in a country, then gets to use threats of violence to control a country. And then let's say something goes wrong. Let's say your economy isn't doing great. And so how do you deal with that? Well, you ramp up and you spark nationalism, pride. You need to fight. They're taking this from you. And it leads up and up and up and up until you get to this point. That's the entire outcome. You can't have nationalism without ending up at this point, at least not historically.
An idea that was basically invented 70 years earlier. So we've been talking about Europe, but things like railways and mass media spread around the world, and so did the idea of a nation. Just like in Europe, communities tied by language or history started to think of themselves as nationalities, ready to fight for nations of their own. Oftentimes, this happened in places where people were forced together by arbitrary imperial borders, often drawn by Europeans. But even that was a unifying idea that led people to rise up, to kick their colonizers out, and to fight for their own nationality.
Lennon, I've been streaming since 3 a.m.
Yeah. And soon the entire world would be defined by this idea of the nation. Firm borders, centralized governments, flags, and pride.
I have to stream at night because it's too hot during the day and I don't have air conditioning. I have to have 2 LED lights on facing me and I have no air conditioning. It's like 97 degrees during the day.
Your country. But while this looks neat on a map, it's not perfect, because the idea of a nation is inherently imperfect. We have this idea that every person is entitled to a nation of their own, but the way those people identify ebbs and flows and changes.
You want to link it? Because we can watch it another time, Zach, because like this is a topic that I regularly kind of bring up, just not in like this detail. We've never talked about the nation not being real, but like we were kind of getting there anyway. If you have another one, hell yeah.
One box. We start wars over territory that our national myth says belongs to us. We fight over who belongs in our national community and who doesn't, and who gets to decide. So much of the conflict and violence in our world today comes from our belief in the nation. And my question in all of this is there a better way, a more peaceful way to organize ourselves? And yet it feels like we're stuck in this way. These identities that seem so firm, and they seem like they're getting like firmer and more intense every year. Like this is the only way that we can organize our world, by countries and nationalities.
The good news is that it's not necessarily as fixed as you might think. National identities can change. Like, let's go back to France, where it's becoming more accepted that you can be French, regardless of your race or religion or your place of birth. But at the same time, there's also a rising backlash to that clings to the idea of France as just for the French. You know, like it or not, people need some sort of collective identity to hold on to, and national identity is just the one we have right now.
It seems like one answer is that we still have these identities that are fixed around land and borders, but that they can expand and become bigger and take on different meaning. Like the idea of European, that feels like an identity that is very real. It's still collective and it's still
very
defined,
new.
but it doesn't have the danger of exclusion, ethnicity, competition, and war, at least not within those big borders. How would you describe a cosmopolitan identity?
Think of people who live in a big global city like New York or Hong Kong.
So the right wing have national identity politics. Nationalist identity politics. Yes, exactly. That is what it is. Their entire base is nationalist identity politics. And yes, Harris is a lib. It is what it is. It's still a good video. And like Infallible Foul, I posted that in the media sharing channel on the Discord as well.
Or London or Singapore, and this identity that you are a person of the world, that you're a globe traveler, that you're taking in many different cultures, that's kind of cosmopolitan identity. Which is ironic, we don't think of that as an identity, but it absolutely is, and it's one that's taken the place of national identity.
What else do you think exists out there?
It's a difficult connection to make because it doesn't seem the same as the type of identity that we normally consider. But no, this is a deeper ingrained mythological nationalist identity politics. Johnny Harris is like, Europe doesn't have racism. We talked about that before we started the video. I did say, you know, he leaves stuff out. I'm here to fill in the gaps that Johnny leaves.
This. And does the nation ever go away? Or does it just get watered down?
If he knew everything, then I couldn't watch this video. It would be content stealing because then I would have nothing to say.
And become less salient over time.
There are lots of places that you can get your sense of identity and your sense of community from. I mean, I think there are people who find that in religion. You can find that in your profession. You can find that in your local community, which is the way that a lot of people used to do it.
Yes, they do, male rights. They constantly do. They just have it coded so you can't understand it. That's the entire point of this video.
All becoming more aware and more conscious of the fact that we need to get community from someplace is making us a little more thoughtful about it, and at times more constructive about it. Although
tell me you're not paying attention without telling me you're not paying attention.
Of do we want a hardened national identity that's about us versus them and who's in and who's out, or do we want to create some sort of a way of thinking about our role in our community and our identity that is more inclusive?
I also wonder...
It's not even just about inclusivity. It's about reality. It's literally just... It's not about inclusivity. It's just reality. There is no such thing as a country. There is no such thing as a nationality. There's no such thing as one consistent, unchanging culture.
If humans need an enemy, like... or at least... in a nationalistic context, there seems to have to be a them in order for there to be an us.
Under
but
capitalism.
I do wonder within our psychology if these identities that don't have an enemy are less potent or have less staying power than the kind of embattled sense of like, I'm an American and terrorists are out to get me.
Well,
you know?
That's true because it's reactionary. It is based on emotional reaction that goes above and separates you from the actual community. You don't need an enemy to survive. Your enemy is death. And your point in life is to A, not die as quick as for as long as possible, and to improve your life standards as well as your community's life standards. Because again, improving your community improves your life, and improving your life when you are cooperative with your community improves the community. It is a circle of balance that impacts everybody. It benefits everybody. But it doesn't benefit one person over everybody else, which is why we built these myths, because there were people who wanted power, and you can't do that in a cooperative community-based setting because everybody works together. One person's benefit is supposed to benefit the community so that the community can grow and then benefit that one person even more so. But if you remove that community aspect and you make it a myth of a nation and you give someone an enemy, then you can remove any of the benefit for the community and give all of that benefit to the individual. That's the point of nationalism.
Like having an enemy is such a potent way to coalesce people around fear.
I think that's totally true. I think there's so much evidence that psychologically just our brains are so much more drawn to identities that are defined around fighting and resisting,
we like making
fearing
patterns.
Some outgroup, some them.
It's our brain.
But I think that just goes to show that it is something that we have to be conscious about and really thoughtful about in order to rise above.
So this has been a pretty fascinating history for me. And after charting through it, I'm left with this feeling that countries and nations are ideas that we as a world are still learning to live with peacefully. But ultimately, countries are just that. They are an
I think we can move past this, because the right really does not like the idea of globalism. But again, countries aren't real. We are all mixed. I mean, look at the maps of Earth. This is the spread of here we go. Where is it? Gimme. Here we go. That's ethnic groups in Europe. None of them are attributable to any one country. All of these spread out. There is a global aspect to humanity, and we need to return to that. Return with a V to this. Return with a V to community instead of individual-based life. You can still have some of that individualism, but you need to balance it out with community, because otherwise you either go to one extreme or the other. What's the extreme of individualism? The extreme of individualism is fascism. What's the extreme of too much community and not enough individualism? It's also fascism. I'm a humanist, just not a nationalist. True. I'm having a good day, Wardega. Good morning. Just another witch lord. What did the world look like at this time Visora wants to return to? Like, not a really one... Like, it's not returning to that world. It's returning to that type of interaction, is all I mean. We don't want to go back to the past. I want to keep the good parts of today, but I want to... Yeah, by the way, good to see you. Happy first time watcher. I want to keep everything that is beneficial to us today, but I want to remove this idea of the individual matters more than the community. Both are equal. This is a map of ethnicities across Europe. We were talking about how people and how countries aren't real, how we talk about the world as if it's split up into specific groups and specific countries. Everyone in America is American. Everyone in France is French. Everyone in Germany is German. But none of that's true. We are all a mix of ethnicities, cultures, not trying to preserve a culture, preserve a national identity is the death of a culture, is the death of that country. What we need to do is engage in a way that is beneficial to us and to them. In the title, America Under Attack, you mean this crash? No, we went over a bunch of stuff in this video. You should watch the stream from the beginning. We went over a lot of people's rights being taken away. The crash was not an attack. The crash was just blatant stupidity that you can blame directly on the Trump administration for firing hundreds of FAA workers when they were already understaffed. It's an attack on humanity in America. Zach, I think that not only the boomers, but the memes of the boomers will keep the race realism apparent throughout our lifetime, sadly. A couple generations after us might learn. I get that, but it is our... It's in the very beginning, and I will cut it into videos. It is our job to at least try and perpetuate this idea of what benefits your community benefits you, and to stop trying to give power to one specific person on top of everybody else. That's not how humanity has worked. Like, again, we learned in this video that for like the idea of a country is just barely 150 years old. It's Italy wasn't Italy until after World War II. They didn't have a national identity. They made this shit up because it perpetuates this individualistic system where one person is above everyone else. The idea of race is old, but race doesn't have to play into this at all. It doesn't have to. You can be any race and still engage in community. It's the idea of nations. It's the idea of nationalism. It's the idea of patriotism that are the things that cause these problems, because all of those separate you from the rest of your community. Because again, what happens in a country that is specifically, like, again, let's go back to France here. This is all of the different languages that were spoken in France in about 1850. Now, all of these are slightly different cultures. If you go here, they have different cultural aspects. If you go here, they have different cultural aspects. But then when France unifies, all of these smaller cultural aspects are, some of them are adopted into the greater cultural, like, zeitgeist, or some of them are just erased. And you don't need to do this, because what happened at the end when all of this coalesced just created an empire. This is right before Napoleon. And this idea of nations, this idea of coalescing, is what leads to nationalism, which leads to violent war, it leads to segregation, it leads to class structures, and it leads to empires. It leads to fascism. Again, too much individualism without any community, fascism. Too much community without any individualism, also fascism. You need to find a middle ground where you have individual and community-based engagement. You need to be engaging in a cooperative sense, not in a personal benefit sense, not in the profit motive. This is required to get out of the capitalist framework anyway. And again, this is not going to happen in our lifetime. I have no expectation of that. Frank! Come say hi. Hi. Aw, okay. He's so camera shy. Yeah, he's too camera shy. But you guys understand what I mean? Like, this is not something that's just gonna happen in our lifetime, but it's something that we have to work towards. It is something that we have to engage in our communities now, while we're under threat of fascism, while we're under threat of attack from the dominant cultural group, the dominant power-holding structure, with their threats of violence. And again, violence doesn't need to mean like militias. It literally can just mean arrest you and put you in jail. Someone said the IRS. If you don't pay the IRS, they will do violence against you. They will put you in jail. That is what laws are. They are threats based on the dominant cultural controlling majority of any given country, or really area of land, because it doesn't have to be a country, that will threaten you to follow what they want you to do with violence. That's it. You need to do this interpersonally, not on a systemic level. We're not anywhere close to the level of systemic, like, denationalization, but you need to at least for yourself understand that the idea of the nation is a made-up idea, and that we are all people that belong on this earth, and that we are all equal, and that we are all giving our power to somebody above us because of this idea of patriotism, of nationalism, of pride in your culture. Cultures change. That's how they grow. Nations aren't real. They are drawn borders of land that are created by a person in power to control a group in them. Everyone in the world is part of my